If you talk to any classical music enthusiast, and I'm only the barest of enthusiasts, and you say the word chaconne, they'll probably think of Johann Sebastian Bach's Partita No. 2.
Hello, my name is Ria Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world.
Hip, hip, hooray!
Bringing us into episode 416 of Cider Chat, we heard from Brian Wing discussing how a piece of classical music inspired his cider making, both in the naming of the cider and also on how the profile spoke to him. And he's going to be talking a little bit more about that, and I will save that full story for that featured conversation coming up. But I do want to say, I know a lot of folks out there in Ciderville, we're all inspired by music, and it's that art that kind of blends within the glass, doesn't it? And that's kind of the beauty of it. You know, how many times has any one of us been out and about enjoying a nice cup of cider, rocking our foot, maybe moving to the beat, maybe a cider in hand, dancing to the music? It just goes hand in hand with some of the best times that one shares in life with others, which is certainly around music. I do it all the time. I mean, that's why we have music on the podcast here. And I should probably announce that, you know, the music on the podcast is primarily music that I wrote and my cousin Jay and I sing together. So when you hear that little ba-da-da-dum, that's Jay and I singing there. And I've been playing some rounds that have been going on at the end of the podcast. You will often hear the We Like Cider song. And we do a little round with that, which I would love to do with some other folks. If you're game at maybe like the next conference that we're at, you want to do a little singing, do a little We Like Cider round, I would really like that. I'd love to record and get some different versions of that. But that particular round, and I'll play at the end of this episode here, was sung with myself, Jay, my brother Mark, and Jay's partner Nancy. So cool stuff. Fun. Anywho, it's all about music, right? Was it Rumi who said, when everything just kind of blends into music, you know, that is life. Yeah. All right. We're going to be hearing that featured conversation with Brian. We're getting into the summer months here. I have a little bit of news about a whole bunch of different things I want to be getting into. So we're going to be rolling to that next, because I think it's really good for you to know one of the things that's going to be happening at the upcoming Pennsylvania Cider Fest. All right, let's get a little bit of the logistics, and then I'll hold the exciting news, at least to me, what's going on. So first off, June 15th, that's the date for the Pennsylvania Cider Fest. And this is something that has taken place in the past. And then we had that kind of crazy world scene where things kind of like, you know, got shuttered in place. But now it's back and it is rocking. You could get VIP tickets, which I highly recommend, from 12 to 1. It's an outdoor cider fest. It takes place at the South Mountain Fairgrounds. That's at the South Mountain Fruit Belt area of Pennsylvania. And when they say Fruit Belt, they mean it. This is south of Scranton, Pennsylvania. So if you're going, almost like drawing a direct line down from Scranton, I think it works like that. It's to the west of Gettysburg. It's a stone's throw from Philadelphia then. You know, it's not that far away. And you're going to be able to be outside. You could bring your own cooler. Well, maybe you can't bring your own cooler. You could bring your own chairs. Keep the cooler in your car, because that's where you'll put your cider after you purchase it to go. You get that at the gate. So you could bring chairs, you could bring a little sun tent for yourself and just hang out, enjoy the music and vendors. And all the makers are from Pennsylvania, using Pennsylvania fruit. And you know it's going to be a blast. So again, VIP tickets from 12 to 1. General admission starts from 1, and the whole event goes till 4 p.m. There's events on Friday night before the fest that is happening. There's events after the event closes in the area, and also on Sunday morning at the Plowman Tap Room. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. But the big news to me is when I heard that there are going to be baby goats at the Pennsylvania Cider Fest. It's called Baby Goat Snuggling. And for $5, you could snuggle the baby goats for as long as you like. And I'll tell you, if you have never experienced this and you are an adult out in the world who has some form of responsibility, whether it's putting out a cider podcast weekly, or you got kids, or you're in a relationship, or you're just going to work, or you had to get yourself to the Pennsylvania Cider Fest, and you finally go there and you're like, oh, I'm feeling really buzzy, I just want to relax. Go snuggle a baby goat. It will blow your mind. It would just bring immense amount of happiness into your life. And I think it's so stinking cool that they have this happening in Pennsylvania. It's so Pennsylvania, right? It's this classic PA at its best that they have baby goat snuggling at a cider fest. I have not heard of this before. I think this is like one of those Guinness Book of World Records for the cider community to have baby goat snuggling. And it's a family farm, the Steinmetz farm. They're the ones who have the little baby goats there. And they're going to be as cute as can be. I mean, you could start doing some yoga and have the goat, walk on your back. People pay big bucks for that experience. In fact, one of the ways I got turned on to this is when I was up in the Finger Lakes. This is back in 2018, doing a tour there. And don't you know, there's a little baby goat scene, and a lot of the students from the nearby colleges like Ithaca and Cornell would go to the farm and just sit out with the goats because it's almost like a Zen experience. I can't talk enough about this. I'm so thrilled, over the moon. Anywho, there is a promo code if you want to use that for $10 off your ticket. Definitely use it. It's Ciderville, all capital letters, Ciderville, and that'll get you $10 off. So you could get that VIP ticket super easily. Go to the show notes for this episode. You'll see a link to get your tickets, and you can also follow along the PA Cider Fest on Instagram and Facebook. It's time for Who's Been Cross-Promoting Cider? Last week's episode was number 415. It was titled Cider Hybrids, Cider Nothings, or Cider Somethings. And we had a whole panel of folks that were discussing this topic. It was pre-recorded at CiderCon 2024, and a really cool conversation. And one of the folks on the panel was Tom Oliver of Oliver's Cider and Perry. That's based in Herefordshire in I guess maybe it's like a little spot in Herefordshire, like a village called Oakapitcher. And that is where you could visit Oliver Cider and Perry. I know they do have a tasting room there. It's not that Tom's always going to be there. Tom Oliver, who is a very well-known cider maker. Everybody adores Tom as a person. And of course, his cider is absolutely delicious. He posted it. In fact, even today when I was going live with this episode, he reposted it both on Instagram and on Facebook. He shared the Instagram reel that I've been having fun setting up for everybody out there in Ciderville each week when this podcast goes live. And then also sharing off of the Cider Chat Facebook page to his page and also to his personal page too. So thanks a lot, Tom. Really appreciate that. We also saw that the Cider Explorer, that is Natalia. She writes about the European cider scene predominantly, but she's a world critic of cider. I'm saying that lovingly because she's very good at being a critic of cider and getting into the details of it. And I like her style. So she was really delightful for sharing on her Facebook page the recent episode on cider hybrids. And then we also saw Marcel of De Hanener, which is a Netherlands cidery that's based in the southeastern section of the Netherlands. If you are American-centric, like a USA citizen, you typically call that country Holland, but Holland is only one part of the Netherlands. The entire country is the Netherlands, and if you're anywhere else in the world, that's how they refer to it. They don't call it Holland. And I think that was something that was, people associate tulips with Holland, which is true, but Holland is only one region, so it is the Netherlands. I just want to put that out there. It's something I learned. I didn't know that at first. It was something I only really learned by going over there and working for so many years. Anywho, Marcel, thanks again for sharing. He used the hashtag #XPromoteCider, which is what we're really pushing out there into the world to kind of get everybody to be able to talk about other things going on. Sometimes isn't it easier to talk about other folks than it is to talk about yourself? So this is an opportunity to kind of share the love out there of things happening in the cider sphere, in the news. And then in turn, we get to share it for you and talk about you. And that's one way to kind of keep cider in the news and cider going up. We also saw that our friends at Spacetime Mead and Cider Works, that's in Dunmore, Pennsylvania, they shared it to Facebook and they wrote this little piece here. It says, "Where do we get ideas that challenge us to get better, to think differently, and provide ideas? This podcast, hashtag Cross Promote Cider," and they shared the episode on cider hybrids. That was really lovely. Thank you so much, Dan. Spacetime Mead and Cider Works is right next door to Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I think this is really key to notice. It's called Social Scranton, and they have a Facebook page. And they post things that are very community related, like, fairs happening, little events in town. And Scranton, Pennsylvania is considered, I think, the city of electricity. It's also where Joe Biden, the President of the United States, hails from originally. And I worked in that area for many, many years at a psychiatric hospital in the region there doing consultation. And so I got to know that area of Pennsylvania, and Spacetime Mead and Cider Works is right next door in Dunmore. And I just think that they probably saw that Spacetime Mead and Cider Works was posting and decided to reshare that episode on cider hybrids to their Facebook page for the city. Now, how cool is that? That is what this is all about, doing hashtag #XPromoteCider, to keep on sharing it, because truthfully, a lot of tourism bureaus, a lot of different cities want to share what's happening, and they are gleaning that off of other sites. So if we keep cider in the news, this is one of the, this is data, baby. This is like telling you exactly what's happening. And I really, big kudos to Dan at Spacetime, because I think, again, they saw it there and then shared it. Fantastic. And then we also saw a home brewer down in Tennessee, in Smyrna, Tennessee, no less. So we know Smyrna is a name of a quince variety. It's called Thompson's Brewed, and they have a brewery, in the basement. It's called the Basement Brewery. Who hasn't had one of those? I still have one of those. It's more just a fermentation area. It's not really brewing in that way, but it's all good. People who homebrew also make cider. It is a really wonderful crossover, and they also make wine too. Anywho, just recently posted on their Instagram account a photo. They must have taken it on the plane, like in the backseat of the plane, and you could kind of see your trip. It shows where the plane is in flight, and the flight was going from Tennessee all the way over to London. Jelly about that, going to London, going to the UK. Wonder what you're doing there, Thompson Brewed. Anyways, it said in the captions, what to do for the next 9 hours? Well, cider chat, of course. Oh, that just made my heart swell. Absolutely, Ooh, that's lovely. I just love the thought of going. I definitely download podcasts when I'm flying too, and thank you for listening to Cider Chat. How cool, down in Tennessee. So that's what it's all about. You could join too. Just share something about Cider Chat. Use the hashtag #XPromoteCider. If you can remember that, that's great. You could also download the info flyer at ciderchat.com. It's a little PDF. You'll find it at the support page. It's a way to support Cider Chat if you're a listener. Post it in your tasting room. And if you've been on the podcast and you want to post that in your tasting room, well, then contact us here. Send an email to info@ciderchat, and we'll tag your episode. We'll set up a QR code for you so you could put that up there too. And that's one way to let folks know you've been on the podcast, and also to let them know of all the resources that are going on. If you have a tasting room out there in the world and you want people to really get into cider and not just be consuming it and, not understanding it, if you really want them to be educated, Cider Chat's a great resource. So thank you once again. Always looking forward to seeing the cross promotes of cider out in the news.
Walking through the orchards.
Up next is our featured conversation with Brian Wing. Brian, once again, is a cider maker and one of the co-founders of Green Bench Brewing, Mead, and Cider. So they have two operations. They have the brewing production facility and tasting room, and they also have Web City Cellar right next door, and that has a tasting room, open air. This is where he does all the production of all the meads and cider. If you go back to episode 398, and there'll be a link in the show notes, you could hear a bit more of Brian's backstory. But this conversation was recorded off of a telephone. I was just super excited because, well, there was a delivery at the door, and you're going to hear about that. And yeah, so let's go right to this next, making it a perfect time to grab a glass and join this chat with Brian Wing of a Green Bench Brewing, Mead, and Cider based in Saint Petersburg, Florida. I got this amazing box of cider. Came in, the delivery woman said, "Hey, this is heavy." Okay, I didn't know what it was. And then I saw it said Brian Wing. And I pulled out these 4 beautiful 750 ml bottles. You have like Black Twig, then the Red Field is just that like rosé, you know, and then the Malice that the celebrity chef Brian Duffy was just raving about. That was in episode 401. And then help me with the pronunciation of this one. I want to make sure I have it.
Chacon. That is Chacon, yeah.
All right. Well, can we start with like the Black Twig? I see that you're serving this at the cidery now.
This would be what, I guess 2022 crop, right? So then, you know, and of course, all of the ciders you've got there in those bottles usually take a fermentive. By the time, you know, from going into the tank until they're going to bottle, it's usually in the neighborhood of like 8 or 10 or 12 months, right? That process. So we're on a pretty good seasonal cycle. So, you know, the 2022 juice gets released in 2023 and so on and so forth. So the Black Twig 2022 was the first time I've used that apple. You know, we've talked about this before, but the season, you know, but leading up to the season, I'll look and talk with, you know, the orchardists that I partner with, and, you know, they kind of lay out, here's all the apples that I'm going to have this season and how many I'm going to have of each. And Black Twig's one I hadn't played around with. So I said, well, you know, that one sounds interesting. Send me a tote of that by itself so I could bring it in and play around with it. And what came in was this gorgeous, like, peachy blush color juice. Mm-hmm. And it was just a really interesting varietal by itself. And I got, you know, when the juice came in, I just got this sort of low acid, relatively low acid, I should say, and tons of like apple peel, some apricot. There's a lot going on in there. And then I fermented that out as a single varietal to see what it would turn out like, since it, you know, I hadn't used it before. And then I liked it so much that I blended a little bit of chestnut crab in there because I think it needed a little bit of the acidity, you know, to just kind of brighten it up. But what I really liked about the Black Twig, that, you know, as a product, you know, that blend was, I talked about apricot, but I was getting this really cool, like, I sort of think of it like damp leaves on a forest floor, this organic sort of decomposition kind of smell, you know, like you get in the forest floor in fall. Mm-hmm. And almost maybe a touch of barnyard, but, you know, just super, super subtle. And then the flavor was all, you know, like dried apple, mild acidity, a little bit of astringency, but really gentle. And so for my ciders, this one would be on the lower end of the acid profile. And I just thought it was a really, really cool sort of earthy, complex flavor profile that I really liked. So Black Twig was one of my real surprise favorites from the year.
Yeah, that's I love you're hitting it everywhere that I love. You know, damp leaves on a forest floor, a little bit of barnyard, low acidity. That is, for me, my palate is just like, oh, I can't wait to crack this bottle open. And I love your description of that kind of like peachy. And when we think peach, you know, we're looking at like kind of an orangey color, but it's a little yellow too, and that's really what comes through in the bottle. It's just gorgeous. Hey, the chestnut crab. So on the bottle it says, and let me just explain what the label looks like. You have this beautiful font that says Black Twig, and of course Mead and Cider, Green Bench Brewing Company. down in Saint Petersburg in Florida. And then it says 80% black twig and 20% chestnut crab. So I'm not too familiar with the chestnut crab. Can you fill me in on that?
Yeah, I'll always bring in a couple crab because I obviously I use them for so much in terms of the sugar content and then also tannin acid depending. And the chestnut came in and you get a little bit of this variety this year, got a little bit of kind of a smokiness, this phenolic smokiness to it. Tart, obviously. I mean, I blended it in here because I wanted the acid to sort of back that up. But you do get sort of that relatively high gravity, tart, sweet, and then just some really interesting complex kind of phenolics that come from that apple this year. Every year is different, but this particular batch came through there like that. I wanted a low acid cider in the black twig as a brand, but too low it gets kind of flabby and a little boring, and so it just needed just a little bit of a pick me up there, and the chestnut helped fill that gap.
Really nice, and it also says on the label that it's a sparkling cider. Are all these bottles sparkling, or just this and the malice too?
Everything that you've got there, is force carbonated. Yeah. Okay. None of the brands that you've got in the box there are naturally carbonated. So everything's force carbonated and bright and then packaged. Yeah.
Well, what a nice alcohol by volume too in this. It's like 6.4%. So super drinkable, a perfect summer cider, year-round cider, really. And I see it's now on tap or available in bottles at your tasting room.
Yeah. I packaged up a small amount of bottles because I had, I think, between the cans and bottles, I didn't send you any cans this time, maybe next box, but between cans and bottles this last season, I think we packaged, I want to say maybe 8 brands of cider, so 8 different ciders. And so, you come to Green Bench and there's just sort of I'll probably have 4 or 5 on at a time across the property. And then, of course, the bottles and cans are all for sale to go or whatnot, but we'll just rotate those in and out kind of at our whim of what we want on that weekend or that week. And so they're kind of on a constant cycle. Yeah.
So are you saying that what these bottles in front of me can also be found in cans too to take out on the boat?
Not those specific brands, okay. Right? I do package 16-ounce tall boys of a lot of we package both 12 and 16, but for the heritage fruit, I'll usually do 16-ounce 4-packs. And so I've got a really nice Northern Spy blend that's available in the fridge right now at Green Bench. I've got a really nice russet that's a Roxbury and St. Edmunds russet blend that's in a 16-ounce can as well. We did a couple others, like what else did we have? Albemarle Pippin we had in cans. We did a Gold Rush cider in cans. So we'll do kind of a split between the 750 ml bottle format and then the cans because, I want to be able to go to the beach or the boat with a can of cider as well.
Yeah, not just any can of cider. You're talking about some beautiful apple varieties in a can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Really, really nice. Yeah. Do you have a little barbecue station on your boat too, like hanging over the side?
I don't personally, but I've got a couple friends that do that, set up the grill, to be able to cook. What I normally do is I throw it in, I throw a camp stove in the boat and then we'll just run the boat up onto a beach. Yeah. And then just take it off and set up a tent and all that to be able to cook out and have some really good ciders along with it. Yeah,
same. I just love it. It's cider on the water. So perfect. I want to talk about the malice because I haven't tasted that yet. The bottle that I got from you when we were recording at CiderCon in Portland, I sent to Chef Brian Duffy, who just raved about it, just absolutely loved it, said that this is like better than champagne. Yeah. So let's bring people up to date on this. And you also have this available too at the tasting room.
Mm-hmm. That's right. This brand I would call sort of the flagship cider, and because it's and I think I said this to you in our chat earlier, is that when I get my apples in for the season, this is the first one that's on my mind. This brand, and I'm not always. It's obviously not exactly the same every year, but this one is where I'm always kind of searching a sort of similar flavor profile. And then what I have left after that is what then sort of generates ideas for other brands. So this is the first one. When the juice comes in, this is the first thing I think about blending. And I'm always chasing, you and I are both enormous French cider fanatics, and I'm not to the point where I'm ever going to call my ciders where I would say this is a French style cider. But what I'm doing is chasing kind of a similar experience there. Now, the apples I've got in here, obviously, we're contending usually with higher acid apples, of course, over here on this side of the pond. But so I'm blending primarily I'm really blending first for bitter, sweet, and some bitter sharp, but really to try to boost that tannin profile, and then leverage the bitter sweets to keep the acid relatively low again. But this one, this particular vintage has I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 or 13 varieties in there, leading things like Dabinet and Kingston Black and Chisel Jersey sort of lead the way. But then, I've got Black Twig made it in here, Chestnut and Hughes Crab. Russets always make up part of the blend of this brand each year, because russets are just some of my favorite apples. So this had Roxbury russet in there, and then some apples for aromatics, things like Newtown or Cox Orange Pippin, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of apples that go in here. This is would be the most balanced and rounded profile of the ciders in the box that you'll have, and just is a real treat.
Yeah, I'm going to be definitely not handing that one out. I can't wait to sit with it. And I love the bottle, too. It's a little bit different than the other clear bottles. It reminds me of Eric Bordelay's style of bottle.
Yeah, it is 100%. It is 100%, I'd call it a ripoff, but I'd rather say an homage to Eric Bordelay's bottles, because I always thought that presentation was so gorgeous. And when I saw these from the company we buy most of our bottles from, I said, this looks a lot like Bordelais. I got to have it. And they've since stopped making that bottle now. So I don't know what bottle I'm going to put it in for this year's vintage coming up, but we got a good run of gorgeous bottles out of that one.
Yeah, really stunning. All right, well, let's go on to the next one. Which one should we talk about here? What do you think?
So I think we'll talk about the Redfield, okay. That's another one that this was, again, the 2022 is the first year that I had a sizable crop that I could get from New York of Redfield apples. So it's 100% Redfield. And obviously, as you can tell, it's a red fleshed apple. And I'd never used it before. So I had another, bring me in a full tote of that so I could ferment it out single varietal and then decide what I want to do with it. And I've talked to a couple cider makers that have fermented that out and then had to blend it because they didn't think it was a great single varietal by itself, just was sort of lacking in parts. And I'll tell you, when I got this batch done, I didn't want to do anything to it because I thought it's beautiful. Obviously the color's gorgeous, but the aroma is all really cranberry and citrus. I mean, it just especially the cranberry and then red berry, that sort of aroma hits you, and then just a beautiful high acid cider really, really takes the place of a rosé, at a brunch table or something like that. And there's a really nice soft astringency from it. And one of the things that I like most about it was I always love ciders where you can taste the soil. When you're drinking that, you really feel like you can taste the dirt that the tree was growing in. And that minerality, I think, really comes through in this on the finish in a way that was always super interesting to me. And so I left it as a single varietal. It's definitely the most popular cider in the house right now at Greenbench. I mean, obviously you pour it in a glass and everybody wants a taste of that, but it's just a real crowd pleaser, and I think worked really, really well as a single. So I've got another batch going in the tank right now. Same thing. I just get that burst of cranberry, citrus minerality. It's a really nice cider.
And the presentation, I mean, just sitting on the table, it's just gorgeous. The rosé color of that red-fleshed apple drops down into the label, which is both a photo of the Redfield apple and then a cross-section, and you could see the red flesh. And so it just drops you right into, again, presentation. Lovely.
Yes, I was really fortunate to work with a local artist down here in St. Pete who did watercolor. She's done another label of ours as well, and I called her up. Katie Hoover's her name, and Frankie Baby Art's her handle. But she does her watercolors. I love, and I think watercolor was the perfect medium to capture the sort of the way that Redfield looks, because that watercolor just captures that like sort of gradient so nicely. And anyway, I think it just turned out to be a really beautiful, simple label for a beautiful cider. She does great, beautiful watercolors. Yeah. And she's done, like I said, she's done a couple of our labels. 1124 is another one that she's done for us. I didn't have room to fit that in the box for you, but I'll send it another time, maybe with some cans along with it so you can see. But she does great art. And watercolor, I think, is just a perfect medium for apples.
Yes, that's wonderful. Yeah, if you send some cans, I might be able to bring them over with me to France on the next cider tour.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, cool. Well, yeah, I love that label. And when people, hear watercolor, they might think it's kind of like bleeding out into the rest of the canvas. But in this case, no, it almost looks like it's a photo of the apple. So
yes.
wow.
It's really, we've got that system down where she'll do the art, and then we'll build a label around it. So yeah, it worked out really nicely.
Yeah, very impressive. All right, and this fourth one here that says 50% Wixon, 25% Yates, which I love, and with Harrison 25%. Those two together, and now Wixon. That's like boom. So
it's this one's intense. So Chaconne is a reference to a musical piece from Bach. If you talk to any classical music enthusiast, and I'm only the barest of enthusiasts, and you say the word Chaconne, they'll probably think of Johann Sebastian Bach's Partita No. 2, which is a solo violin piece. And I encourage, the reason I bring it up is there's a reason why I named the cider this, and if you listen to the piece, you'll get some of why that is. So I encourage you to take a listen to that. But I mentioned before, kind of when I'm doing this blending process, I'm picking and choosing for a few brands, and then I start playing around with whatever's left. And so a lot of times I have a lot of acid left over, a lot of acid apples at the end of this, because I'm always blending for low acid, because that's what I shoot for first, and then we monkey around with whatever's left. And so I had all this Wixon left over because it's one of my favorite apples. I use a ton of it every year. And then Harrison was a new one, and I'll always give Tristan Wright over at Lost Boy credit for just turning me on to Harrison apples, because I had one of his and I said I got to try it. And then the Yates apples, which is another one that I had in the totes there left over. So I put it all together. It's a very high acid cider pre-ferment. And I'm like, well, let's see what this turns out to be. And it ended up being one of my favorites of the year, because when you put it up to your nose, you're going to get this intense pear and citrus aroma. Pear comes through really clearly for me on this one in an awesome way. And then some tropical fruit as well. It's got an intense sort of mouth-watering acidity. And you get this green apple, lemon lime finish, and maybe even just like a touch of black pepper. When you try it, tell me if I'm crazy, or tell me if you get a little bit of that. But it's very much a profile of like a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, that sort of really assertive, intense acidity and super fruit forward. It's really, really nice. I thought it turned out really nicely. But there's something a little bit, you could call it, out of balance as a cider, in terms of like it's way too heavy on the acid. But I wouldn't call it out of balance. I'd just say it's a different flavor profile. I don't believe in that sort of like everything's got to be balanced. This one's it's super acid forward, and it's sort of shocking in how acidic it is when you first drink it, and you accustom yourself to it really quickly. So it then just becomes like, it just makes you want to drink more, because it's just mouth watering. But there was something about that sort of like that impact and that, sort of manic kind of flavor. And I'm getting pretty esoteric here, but I had been listening to, I heard that piece from Bach, and saw a really, really interesting quote. I think it was Schumann or somebody had written sort of a comment about it, about how it was like, how Bach had somehow like, encapsulated so much emotion in this, and it would almost like, he could picture himself trying to write it, and he would go mad doing it or something like that. It was, I'm paraphrasing terribly, but it really came down to kind of like this. When you hear that piece of music, it's intense and sort of like a little bit crazy and beautiful. But so that, I don't know, I don't normally get too far out there or abstract with my cider names and associations, but this one, it made sense, because when you drink it, it really is sort of an experience, let me put it that way. So I love it. It turned out great.
Yeah, I mean, just the label alone is an experience. You have these 3 robed skeletons playing on, like they look like they're doing a violin, so that kind of pulls it all together to the music. It's just stunning. We'll make sure to have a link in the show notes to that particular musical piece. And, once again, Yates and Harrison alone are just as a blend blow me out of the water. One of my favorite ciders from Albemarle in Virginia, they make a blend of Harrison and Yates. And then you adding on the Wixon which has this very like floral notes, and woo, we'll be cracking that and really enjoying that too. And all these ciders, except for like the Malice, around the 6.5, the Malice is a little over 7. Nice range, not going to have you walking sideways, so you can really enjoy it. And, with the Chacon, that is like perfect. That high acid, that speaks to like your Michigan roots. Michigonians really love that, like high acid and really bright cider. So a little bit of something for everybody, huh?
Yeah. At one time I was at a fest of some, this goes back a couple of years, but I had a lineup of, I'm always the guy that brings like 7 or 8 things to a fest like that. And somebody once said to me, they tried a couple of things and they said, everything you've got here is a different experience. And I thought that was one of the coolest compliments I've ever gotten as a cider maker. And something that like I always want to do is have, just have everything be a different experience altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. And, definitely keep on bringing out your artistry. Never make any excuses for that being esoteric and going off on it, because cider making is an art. And here you are fusing your love of music and just a visual all together in the bottle. That's exactly what cider fans like myself are looking for. So I appreciate that part of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is there anything else like down in Florida, down in St. Pete, that we should know about coming up for the cidery there?
We're entering summer, which means that we've got so many cool events and things like that going on down here at Green Bench. I'm in a quiet phase right now at the cidery because, of course, we're sort of mid ferment on all of our, so that every tank I've got is just full of all this amazing heritage fruit that's just quietly, aging and maturing. And I'll start releasing that as we get later into summer. The Redfield will be first because that's a really nice one to have fresh. But, I'll start packaging all of these, the new vintages, probably in like August, September timeframe at the earliest. So we get this nice kind of quiet chill, and we get to just rest and drink all the amazing ciders that we've got. And of course, on the beer side of the house, we're brewing like mad as always. But it's a really nice time to be down. Come down to St. Pete if you're in town. Come down, grab a beer, a cider, a mead, and enjoy the beautiful space we've got down here in St. Petersburg. It's not a bad place to spend some time or a vacation.
You always make it really enticing to get down there. Look, I want to keep you on the phone a little bit after, but we're going to say goodbye to Ciderville for now. And I want to make sure that you give regards to Chris and the brewers down there and everybody for us here at Cider Chat. I know that you guys are cranking it out and just making super quality product. And, once again, blowing our mind. You get the apples from the Northeast and bring them down and just create magic in the bottle. So thanks so much, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Rhea. Yeah.
I kind of hate to say this, but it's true. The only way you could get these ciders that we were just going gaga over is by visiting Webb City Cellar. So that means, you got a little trip on your list here going to St. Petersburg, Florida. I mean, there could be worse destinations to go to get cider. And how cool. I mean, if you didn't get it, they are bringing these apples down from New York State. It just blows me out of the water that people can ship that so far and do such fantastic product. So well done. And just a couple mentions there. He was talking about Tristan Wright at Lost Boy Cider. That's in Alexandria, Virginia. That's a cidery. They have a nice tasting room there. Tristan and Brian were on the same French cider tour. So much fun. And also David Timmerman, who was also on a French cider tour, works now at Albemarle with Chuck Shelton. And Albemarle Cider Works is in Virginia. All these cideries are absolutely 100% worth your time to go and visit, just to meet the makers if you have the opportunity to do that. And they'll just fill you up with such good cheer. And then to taste their product where they make it, dang, there is nothing better, right? All right, so that little piece, Johann Sebastian Bach, that Chacon, or part 2, as you might call it in American lingo, I'm going to have a little clip where you can listen to it at the website for this episode at ciderchat.com. There's a link and you can listen to, it's 13 minutes long, and it's a violin piece. And it's a little somber because the thought was that maybe he was writing it for his wife. Who knows? but it's a little somber and deep and exotic. And sometimes I really like that kind of music, and maybe you do too. So here's a little clip of that to just enjoy and savor in your cup. This composition was written by Johann Sebastian Bach after his first wife passed away. So you feel the somberness and the depth, kind of like the agony coming through. But the reason why that this composition is considered so great is that at the basic level, it's 4 measures long, making it short enough to allow for 64 variations. So if you go to the link in the show notes for this here episode 416, you'll be able to click on and listen to the full song in its entirety. It's about 13 minutes long, a little over 13 minutes, I believe. And yeah, he wrote it for his first wife who passed away. And at least this is how the story goes. I don't know if we know for sure. So you feel the grief and the somber. But at the same time, pulling it back to the cider world, isn't that what cider is all about? Or any craft is taking what can appear to be a very complex problem and having a simple approach to it with depth. That's what I like in the glass. And I have a sense you out there in Ciderville love that too.
Smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
There are many folks who help support this podcast to keep it on the air each and every week. And one of those is the Pennsylvania Cider Fest. That is both Plowman Cider and Homebrew Events who are putting on that event this year. They're really the sponsors behind it. And they sponsored this episode for you. So do check them out and support the Pennsylvania Cider Fest. And while you're there buying your tickets for June 15th, don't forget putting in that promo code Ciderville for $10 off your ticket. But we also have another page at ciderchat.com. It's under the support tab, and it's called Cider Going Up. And this is a special page for patrons who are at a certain level of support. And I missed one of them when I was talking about who was part of this campaign last week on a reel that was posted on Instagram. And that is Duck Chicken Cider. They're based in London. They make cider in a South London flat. Luckily, they're on the first level of the building, and in the back, there is a garden, and that is where they have their whole cidery set up. They don't have apples there that they're using. They prune a local orchard, and then they're able to get the apples, and talk about pioneering tenacious spirit. You got to have a tenacious spirit to be able to do that kind of stuff, and just fun-loving people. That is Colleen and James. They have been longtime supporters of Cider Chat. I've stayed at their home in South London, the little cidery, and wow, it's amazing what some people can do for the love of cider. So do check them out. They are listed there along with 2 other UK makers. So we have 3 from the UK alone, and for a country that can kind of fit in the entire northeast of the U.S., that is pretty spectacular. So I also need to make mention of Ross Cider and Perry Company based in Ross-on-Wye, which is in the West Country of the UK. And each year they have the Ross Cider Fest, which is going to be coming up here in the U.S. That would be over Labor Day weekend. It's 3 days of music and cider, camping in the orchard. Absolutely spectacular. Go into the archives at Cider Chat and check out some of the episodes I've had with both these parties, and also including Tom Oliver. Oliver Cider and Perry is also part of the Cider Going Up campaign. And here in the U.S., we have Spacetime Mead and Cider Works, which I mentioned earlier. They do a lot of cross promotion. They're based in Dunmore, Pennsylvania, right next to Scranton. And also in Pennsylvania, we have Taddy Bogle Cider Works in Acme. That is a family-owned cidery. It's only 45 minutes south of Pittsburgh. They have a beautiful tasting room, a huge area to walk about, just a dreamy place, and the most friendliest, and I mean friendly people. Going to the west, we have Esoterra Cider Works. That's in Colorado, in the Four Corners region of Colorado, and they're doing some really cool stuff, planting a lot of both apples and vines. So we'll be watching that. And also, we have Bent Ladder Cider and Wine in Doylestown, Ohio. That's a family-owned cidery. I have had Bent Ladder on the podcast, so do check out their episode. And we have Press Then Press, which is based in Seattle, Washington, but this is an online cider shop, so they're essentially everywhere. And this is a great shop for getting those hard-to-find ciders in your locale. And we also have the American Cider Association, which is an organization of cider and perry producers in the United States. And going to the further west, or the east, however you want to fly, we have Insider Japan, Japan's first and only bilingual magazine covering the cider universe. And that is run by Lee Reeve. I guess he just became a liaison for the Certified Cider Palmier program that is spearheaded by the American Cider Association, which is kind of an interesting mark. I'd be kind of curious, what folks think about that. Here is the U.S., kind of one of the younger countries, being the standard bearers now for what it means to be a Certified Cider Palmier. I think that is something. The U.S. is often like that. I saw that happening with beer, and now it's happening with cider. So, yay, because here we're a pretty mixed culture of so many ethnicities, a true melting pot. And I like to think of this country that I am part of and a proud citizen of being welcome and open to everyone. But I do want to add this little tip. If you want to get a master palmier level, come on one of the cider tours that I lead, because there is nothing like tasting the cider where you find it. It's a little bit different than learning cider out of a book. Just saying. Okay, with that. And you too can become a patron of Cider Chat. Just Google Cider Chat and Patreon, that's spelled Patreon, or hit the donate button at ciderchat.com. And with that, I leave you here. This is Real Wind Caller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
Drink it like this.
There is a reason why we do it like this.
There is a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason why we drink it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this.
Yeehaw!